You mentioned about cash transfers, and we wanted to hear more about how that can potentially go into, when people have money to buy food, could potentially go into like private markets and hence sort of lead to the erosion of some of the public distribution systems. So, you want to
yeah, there's this provision right in the bill which says similar to the food stamps over here, where you actually have the people go and buy from the free market, which is actually quite detrimental to the whole idea, which would kind of like shirk the government's responsibility of actually providing. And other than that, it will also destroy good public distribution systems in some in some states, while other states which are corrupted and do not have it running might again still go worse because they'd go to the private market, could again make for profit. So something I just wanted to hear.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that one of our strong disagreements with governments,
the current government, exactly,
which has left a window open for cash transfers. It was a really contested point right through the discussions. See, people in, say, the Planning Commission and in the Government of India talk about the necessity for reforms. And reforms is a very difficult word in many ways. And they understand reforms as one of the most central reforms that they see in the public distribution system is precisely what you talked about giving people a choice or gradually shifting over from food transfers to cash transfers. I think it's hugely problematic for many reasons, and I'll just briefly talk about what they are. Firstly, we need to understand the public distribution system in India. It never was intended to be simply the transfer of a subsidy in the hands of the consumers, which is how it is being understood now. It had three different kinds of goals. One was to actually guarantee a price, a base support price to the farmer for their produce. And it's really been important in that way. It does a sort of income protection, that it covers just two major crops, and we haven't penetrated sufficiently all across the country. There's a huge potential further to do it. But the fact that to the extent that it has giving the farmers a base price, and so that's one. The second is the role of price stabilization, and that a lot of food scarcity and even famines occur not because there's an absolute shortage of food, but because prices grow very high, and the government is supposed to quickly move food to areas where prices begin to rise, and to stabilize prices. And then the third objective is, of course, to transfer the subsidized food grain in the hands of the consumer. So firstly, substituting the public distribution system with cash, what about the other two goals? So that's, I think, one problem. But there are other problems as well. The second set of problems to my mind is that the assumption, the implicit assumption is that it's much easier to transfer cash than to transfer food, and there will be less corruption. Now, what is the empirical basis for that? We do have cash transfer programs at present. The most important one really is the old age pension. And as Supreme Court Commissioner in the Right to Food case, I monitor both the functioning of the PDS and old age pensions, among other programs. And I would rate the old age pension as perhaps even worse in terms of its corruption and delays in that transparency than the PBS. And so my second point is that there is the assumption that substituting grain for cash is going to suddenly make the system more, deliver better with greater transparency and integrity is not borne out. And we still have not figured out ways that, if you have to steal, you can steal cash, but you need to reform. And PDS has been reformed as much as pension has been reformed in specific states. Andhra Pradesh has done a great project. reforming the pension system, but Chhattisgarh has done a great job
In
terms of
PDS.
in PDS.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's possible. The last is the question of gender, and there is evidence from all over the world that that cash in the hands of a household tends to be controlled by men, and men tend to have priorities which can be food, but can be other things. I won't stereotype to say that men will just simply drink it away, etc. But there's that globally we've seen that culturally cash is controlled by men, and food in a household tends to be controlled by women, and it is likely to remain within that household. And so I would say that there's much greater chance of a food-based PDS that ending up as nutrition for the child as compared to cash, where there's a chance it will and a chance it will not. So for these many reasons, I don't support the idea of substitute. I think it would be disastrous to do that.
So actually our next question is related to the PDS system, and it came up in one of the sessions this morning. What do you think about including locally grown millets such as jawar and bajra, etc., in the public distribution system beyond just the white rice and the wheat? And there were reasons that were elaborated upon, the advantages of doing that nutrition-wise and fertility of the soil and such.
Not only do I fully agree, but that was one of the suggestions that came in quite early when we were drafting it in the NEC. So what we've done is we've actually put into the law itself that the government has to guarantee the provision of 35 kilos of food grain, which can be wheat, rice or millets. And we've also kept the price lowest for millets. So it's 3 rupees for rice, 2 rupees for wheat, and 1 rupee for millets, incentivizing it to the extent possible. So to that extent, it certainly, I really value it. I think that there's substantial evidence that government's exclusion of millets from PDS has resulted in a change over a period of time over people's eating habits and so on and so forth. And completely, I totally agree that. But the fact is that there is, and that's fortunately been retained by the government even in its draft bill.
So our next question was relating to the silence of the middle class. Even though the Constitution technically abolished discrimination on lines of caste and religion and gender, still the majority of the middle class in India today, including people like ourselves at some level, are comfortable with the silence. And when it comes to caste and religion and subcaste, I think still a substantial part of the population thinks in that mindset, and one doesn't really have to go very far. You pick up a newspaper and see the matrimonial column. It's still very much there. So how do you think we can address this systemic problem?
No, I think that Socrates, I think, has said somewhere that somebody asked him how long will injustice continue, and he said it will continue as long as the person who does not suffer injustice does not feel the same pain and the same anguish and anger as the person who suffers injustice. I think that's something that we need to remember. And I think that the middle classes need to develop a stake in the idea of a more just and humane society. The fact that my child is well fed, well nourished, well educated, and therefore I'm not bothered about, as I said, taught a child maybe a kilometer away who's sleeping in the streets and doesn't have any opportunities. I think the Indian middle class, and middle class everywhere, but I think the Indian middle class is passing through a phase when it is particularly disengaged with suffering around it. For a whole set of, it's a long discussion, but I think it's a combination of the old feeling of caste which justifies people getting what they that their fate, their destinies will be determined by where they are born. The idea of the British class system, which we've also inherited and absorbed, people from good families and bad families, and such, based on their wealth. And then we have, I think,